Hey Ribsy readers, time to get caught up with our favorite four-legged friend today. But before we do that, let's take a little bit of time to think about what was happening yesterday. If we were to think about a major event that we read about yesterday, we would be thinking about two parts. First, we're going to think about how Ribsy escaped from the sailor's house because he was so frantic to find Henry. He had been so excited to finally hear Henry's voice for the first time in so long, and now he's looking everywhere he possibly can. The next major event that we would think about is when Henry meets Larry, the little boy outside the apartment building. Henry is super excited when he meets Larry because Larry has a tennis ball. And for Henry, it's been quite a while since he had the opportunity to see a tennis ball and to use a tennis ball with a little boy. What is also exciting from what we read yesterday was when Larry brings when Larry brings Ribsy inside of his apartment building. He tells Ribsy to be as quiet as possible so that the building manager will not hear. However, when Ribsy gets into the elevator, he's quite confused by the fact that this box is rising, but his body feels weird about it, and he barks. Shh! Larry seemed upset about something because he scowled and grabbed at Ribsy. Shh! She'll hear you! The manager had already heard. A door on the first floor flew open, and a woman's cross voice called up, "Larry Biggerstaff, you get that dog out of this building at once." It was the kind of voice that could make a dog slink away feeling guilty. By the time the little room had stopped moving on the second floor, Larry had slid back the gate and opened the glass door. Before he stepped out, he whispered, "You stay right here. I'll come back and get you in a minute." Then he left the frightened dog and shut him in the little room. Ribsy did not know what to do. He did not want to stay in that little room alone, but there was no way he could get out. He was even afraid to bark, so he made little anxious noises. Suddenly, he felt himself beginning to rise again, while his stomach seemed to stay behind. He barked for Larry to come and get him out of this place, but all he heard was the whir of machinery and the thump of Larry's sneakers running downstairs. If we think about what zone Ribsy's in right now, he's probably feeling really, really anxious, which would put him in the yellow zone. As the elevator stopped on the third floor and his stomach caught up, Ribsy heard Larry's frightened voice coming up the elevator shaft from the first floor. "Dog? What dog?" he was saying. "I don't have a dog." "Don't you lie to me," the manager said. "I know there's a dog in this building." "It isn't my dog," said Larry. Upstairs, a woman opened the door and pushed back the gate. "Hello," the woman said to Ribsy, as if she met dogs in elevators every day. "How did you manage to press those buttons?" This time, Ribsy was taking no chance of being left in this frightening room that had made him lose his stomach. He dashed past the woman and into the third-floor hall, while the door of the elevator closed behind him. Now he didn't know what to do. He was in a long hall with strips of worn carpet down the center and doors on either side. At one side of the hall was a staircase. At the end of the hall was a window with a fire escape sign over it. Nothing looked familiar to Ribsy, who had never been in an apartment before. Larry's voice came up the stairwell. "But I don't have a dog." Ribsy did the only thing he could think of. He started down the stairs towards Larry's voice. "Young man," said Mrs. Creech, "you took a dog into that elevator. You can't fool me." Ribsy hesitated. He did not like the sound of this woman's voice. It reminded him of too many voices that had yelled, "Get off my lawn!" Sometimes voices like this might even be accompanied by something being thrown at you. Ribsy heard the elevator door open up down on the first floor, and the manager say in a quite different voice, "Oh, good morning, Mrs. Berg. I was looking for a dog in the elevator." "No dog in the elevator," said Mrs. Berg, who was a friend of Larry's and who understood this situation. "I've just come to pay my rent." "Certainly," said the manager. "Just step into my apartment while I write your receipt." Ribsy stood listening at the steps, but all he heard was the elevator door close and the machinery moving again. As the elevator rose, Ribsy stared cautiously down the steps. He didn't know what to expect in this strange building where rooms went up into the air. The second floor looked exactly like the third, which Ribsy had just left. The same strip of carpet, the same doors on either side, the same window with a sign over it at the end of the hall. Ribsy felt very confused. He was even more confused when he heard whispers, "Psst, psst." It was Larry, who was supposed to be down below, but who was now up above. While Ribsy had walked down to the second floor, Larry had ridden up in the elevator to the third. "Woof," answered Ribsy, who wanted to get out of this place. "Shh." Larry's worried face appeared in the stairwell above Ribsy. He came tiptoeing down the steps. "I gotta get you out of here," he whispered. "Come on." He started to lead Ribsy down the steps when the door of the manager's apartment opened on the first floor. "Thank you, Mrs. Berg," the manager was saying. "Can't go that way. We can't go that way," whispered Larry. "Come on, let's go this way." Ribsy obeyed because he didn't know where to go by himself and because he wanted to stay away from the woman with the angry voice. Larry led him down the hall toward the back stairs. And here's an illustration that goes along with it. We can see exactly what Beverly Cleary described with the text that she used. A long hall, a strip of carpet down the center, and doors on each side. Larry led him down the hall toward the back stairs, which were near the window with the sign over it. He was about to start down with Ribsy when he heard someone coming up. "I don't know who it is, but I'm not taking any chances," Larry muttered, looking around. He saw the window at the end of the hall and opened it. Ribsy found himself being picked up, put out the open window, and dropped onto the fire escape. The window was closed behind him and a curtain pulled shut. Ribsy's feet slid through the metal bars of the fire escape and stuck down into empty space. If an elevator was a strange place, a fire escape was much, much worse. Ribsy felt as if he should be falling, but instead, there he hung in mid-air. Inside, he heard the manager's angry voice, which made him feel as if he had done something he should not. But he couldn't understand what he had done. Silently, he struggled to get all four of his feet back up onto the metal bars of the fire escape. Ribsy soon discovered that a fire escape was not only frightening, it was uncomfortable. He had to move his feet carefully on the cold metal or they would slip through. It made him uneasy to see the ground so far below. There was an opening in the fire escape big enough to jump through, but the ground was so far down. Since Ribsy could not go down, he did the next best thing. He went up. Because he was an optimistic dog, he hoped things might be better up there. He climbed up cautiously, one step on the steep, slanting ladder at a time. Unfortunately, when he reached the next level of the fire escape, things were even worse. The good, solid ground was farther away. Ribsy peered into the window, but the third-floor hall was empty. With his tail drooping, Ribsy looked around. The view was better, but there was nothing a dog would be glad to see. Only some old fenders and wrecked cars behind the body and fender shop below. He could look out over the roof of the shop and see the cars and buses on the busy street on the other side of the block. He tried whimpering at the window, but no one came. He gave an experimental bark, but there was so much banging in the body and fender shop that no one heard him. Bewildered and frightened, Ribsy lay down on the fire escape as best he could. The cold metal bars pressed into his body, and the breezes blew under him as well as over him. I love how Beverly Cleary writes this paragraph. We already know how Ribsy's feeling emotionally. We know he's feeling sad. She chose that word bewildered and frightened. Bewildered means totally confused by a situation. And now she describes how Ribsy's laying down and the metal bars are cold and they're made of metal. So he's already sad and upset and confused, and the situation gets even worse because he tries to make himself feel better by lying down, and it's a terrible place to have to lie down. Nothing was comfortable. Nothing was familiar. He felt more lost than he had ever felt before. There was nothing to do but lie there on the fire escape, watching the traffic and listening to the banging in the body and fender shop, and wait for things to get better. Half an hour went by, and then an hour. Larry did not come back, and the building was silent because the apartments overlooking the body and fender shop were rented to people who were out all day and did not have to listen to the noise. Ribsy grew cold and stiff. His body hurt from the iron bars that pressed into him. Things were not getting any better. Ribsy had to do something. Ribsy got up and managed to shake himself without having his feet slip through the fire escape. Cautiously, he put one paw and then the other on the window ledge once more and whimpered at the empty hall. All the doors remained closed. No rescuer appeared. Ribsy became impatient. He barked. Still, no one came to rescue him. No one cared about the dog on the fire escape. He was forgotten. How are we feeling at this point? I bet if I looked out at your faces in the classroom, I would see you all with these really sad, sad faces. You really feel terrible for Ribsy at this point. Ribsy turned around carefully and barked through the railing toward the traffic on the next street. The only answer he got was the banging in the body and fender shop below. Ribsy walked gingerly around the fire escape to make sure he had not missed any ways out. There were only the ladder-like steps, and while he had not minded climbing up, they were way too steep to climb down. Ribsy became frantic. He felt as if the whole world had gone off and left him. He barked and barked and barked. There must be somebody, someplace, who would come and get him off this thing. And there was somebody. Somebody was down below on the next street. "Ribsy!" he heard. It was Henry Huggins's voice coming from the new station wagon, which was moving along with the rest of the traffic. "Ribsy!" Henry had his head out of the window and was pointing up to the fire escape. Now, you know I'm going to stop here. We will read more about what's happening tomorrow. As we do that, I want you to be thinking about how would Henry be feeling when he finally sees Ribsy with his own eyes? How would Ribsy be feeling when he finally sees Henry? We'll read more tomorrow.